Okay, so clearly I'm away today, but I'm going to try to record a video with me going through your notes. That way you have a better idea of what's happening. You're still going to do the lab today with Mr. Chan, and then after that I will see you the next time I see you. So we're moving on to our digestion unit, which is the next part of our physiology unit. Clearly this cartoon is awesome in so many ways because it starts with pizza at the top and it shows you what's going on through the system and then what happens at the end. So that's what we're going to go through in the next 2 days. Today we're talking about sort of the function of digestion, and then tomorrow we'll look at human anatomy and the human body, and then we will be done our unit. So let's keep scrolling down. If I've been able to provide you guys with the Kahoot, hopefully I got the link to whoever needed it. If not, we can play it once I come back. You will have to know your macromolecule knowledge from the Molecules of Life unit. So if you have forgotten that knowledge, go review it. You will have to know it for your next assessment. Then we're going to talk about the function of digestion, and then we're going to do a lab with Mr. Chan. So going through this is all in your notes. You should have this on EDSB, but there are 3 main fluid compartments of the body. This is all review from Diversity of Living Things, but it's always good to have it written out for you. So you have the cytoplasm, which is what is inside the cell. This is all the fluid portion. For those of you taking chemistry, it's also the aqueous portion. And then you have your interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between cells. So cells aren't always back to back, so there's always some space between and some fluid that keeps it all moving together. And then you have your plasma, which is the fluid portion of blood, and you all know what's in that. So that is the liquid portion of your body. And here is some of the review from Molecules of Life. So again, the major concept with carbon having 4 bonds, which is why it's our organic molecule. Carbon-based molecules make up our macromolecules. We have 4 of them. We've got carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You need to know all 4 of these. You should remember this from the last unit, I hope. But all 4 of these are important for the body's maintenance of life and also many chemical processes. So if we look at what metabolism is, metabolism you will study in more detail in grade 12, but for the purpose of this class, and especially in digestion, you're looking at metabolism from the side of it is all sorts of chemical reactions or processes that are carried out by cells to maintain life. This means, one, building it, so anabolic reactions, this is building, so any sort of reaction that's like a synthesis, so you're forming molecules, or catabolism, which is the breaking down. So cellular respiration is the catabolism of glucose. You're breaking down glucose and using that in energy, using that in the form of ATP, which is your energy. So looking at those, you need to know what metabolism is from that definition standpoint, which is really just the breakdown and building of different molecules. So that also goes back to our old unit when we looked at if I took a macromolecule and I broke it down into smaller units, what are the building blocks that create a macromolecule? And the answer is the monomers. Monomers make up the macromolecule. So an actual word for the chemical reaction, which you will talk about in chemistry, you will also need to know this for grade 12 biology, is hydrolysis. So if we break down words, because remember, biology is all language, hydro is water, lysis means to loosen, often things, or to break. So lysis, the lysis of a cell, we've learned that breaks the cell or it kills the cell. So in hydrolysis, what you're looking at is you have some sort of macromolecule here, and by using water, we are breaking it up into smaller units. So if you have 4 units here, and then we use water right here, which breaks it up into its smaller components. And perhaps you notice, okay, there's 1 here and there's still 3 here. This part here can still undergo hydrolysis. Will it? Depends on the process. But a huge part of digestion is you're taking all these nutrients that you consume and you're breaking it into smaller units that your body can use. Hence, the idea of hydrolysis becomes so important because you're taking all these big molecules and breaking it down. And that is the main goal of digestion. Then a new term you will learn is enzymes. Enzymes are important. They are a protein molecule, and these protein molecules are important because they're what sort of help with a reaction. So enzymes, they're made out of proteins. They drive most of the reactions in metabolism. Without an enzyme, most reactions will not happen. If you've talked about catalysts in chemistry, catalysts are something that will speed up a reaction, but it will not. But an enzyme, what's important is that it does not get consumed itself. So an example of this, and I hope you still have some of this in the classroom, is if we take liver, you can take beef liver from the grocery store, and you put it in hydrogen peroxide, you will see a reaction occur. Because the enzyme does not get used up in the reaction, if I take out that liver and I put it in hydrogen peroxide once again, that same reaction will occur again. And so what's cool about that is you're able to see that the enzymes do not actually get used up. So then, if we bring it into our digestive system, these enzymes are what cause the breakdown of something in digestion. So, again, everything is language. What is the type of enzyme that breaks down a carbohydrate? What is the type of enzyme that breaks down a lipid or a protein or nucleic acid? And as you can see, all of that is based off of just language. Anything that ends with A's represents an enzyme. So carbohydrates, just by looking at the spelling of the word, because it has its A's, you know it's some sort of enzyme. And so lipase is an enzyme for lipids. Carbohydrates is an enzyme for carbohydrates. Protease is an enzyme for proteins, and nuclease is an enzyme for nucleic acid. So those will be the main digestive enzymes that we look at. Then here are some great diagrams to show you. So they're just breaking things down into their respective monomers. So you remember the monomers for carbs are monosaccharides, monomers for lipids are glycerol and fatty acids, monomers for proteins are amino acids, and monomers for your nucleic acids are nucleotides. Okay, and then water makes up about 2/3 of the body's mass. That's important because with hydrolysis, which is very important in metabolism, you can see that water gets used up a lot. And with the moist environments for respiratory and all that, you can tell that you need water to maintain your moist environment. There's also a typo in here, so just correct the AD here to and. Right, so water is essential for the proper functioning of the body's cells and organs. Just make that change there. You'll also see water's functions here. You will talk more about this in the first unit of grade 12 biology as you look at the biochemistry of water and why it's important for overall cell function. But the purpose for us is to get a background knowledge of this all to look at the digestive system. So the goal of the digestive system is you're taking some sort of larger molecule, so in this case food, and you're breaking it into smaller soluble units because they're going to pass through cell membranes. To pass through a cell membrane, it needs to be a small enough unit. Just like how oxygen can sort of diffuse across, if oxygen was too big, it can't just move across, right? It has to be small enough to diffuse across the cell membrane. So let's look at the 4 stages of digestion. You've got ingestion. I think that speaks for itself. You're eating the food. Then you have digestion, where you're breaking it down either mechanically or chemically. And that is very much as it sounds like. So teeth, because you're chewing it, you are mechanically making it smaller. It's sort of like, think of it as a physical way of doing it. Whereas chemically, you're using enzymes to break things down. You're using acid to break it down. Chemically means there's some sort of chemical reaction that is causing the breakdown. Then you have absorption. You've got all these little pieces of these small little soluble units that have to move across a membrane to get into the circulatory system. Remember, the circulatory system transports everything around the body. So if your muscles need a certain type of nutrient, say they need glucose, Well, then you have to make sure that your body gets glucose into the circulatory system so that it can get to your muscle cells. So eventually all the essential and important nutrients get absorbed, and then anything you don't want is removed. And that normally comes out as fecal matter. So to digest, think of digestion as one tube for everything. Your digestive system is one extremely long tube, and we are going to look at this in more detail when I see you boys next class. So you have an input and an output, mouth at one end and the anus at the other. Food moves along this tube, and at different points, different things happen. Sometimes mechanical digestion happens, sometimes chemical digestion happens, then absorption happens. This all happens in this one canal. Okay, so think of it as one long open tube. And that's where all your digestive system occurs. The overall length of your digestive tract will really depend on your feeding habits. So if we look carefully here, we're comparing a herbivore and a carnivore. So cellulose is what makes up plant walls, cell walls. The cellulose is actually pretty difficult to digest. So generally, herbivores will have longer small intestines. This helps with the complete digestion of cellulose. Whereas we look at the carnivore, their small intestine's not as long. It's also important to note that there are certain forms of plants that we as humans can't digest. So we have trouble digesting corn because we can't actually digest the skin, where certain animals can. It depends on the bacteria that resides in their small intestine, whether or not they can break apart these components. So just notice the difference between herbivore, carnivore. You can imagine an omnivore is somewhere in between. So what you're going to do next, and with the care of Mr. Chan as well, you're going to look at how many carbs you ate growing up. Reason why is think about what you need to break down carbohydrates. You need an enzyme called amylase. And amylase will break down your carbs into what we call a reducing sugar. This experiment will go through and it'll look at how much glucose your saliva can produce. So read through this lab, read this background information, read all of it, and then follow the procedures carefully. Mr. Chan will be there to help answer any questions, but you do need to read the background information if you are to understand how the lab works and why your results either make sense or don't make sense.